On this Sunday night, the 3-year fight for justice. On the anniversary, Canadians remember those killed on Flight PS752.
We are here to seek justice for the victims and their families.
Why victims' families feel the government hasn't gone far enough with Iran. Already battered by flooding.
This is way off the charts.
California braces for a parade of cyclones. Goodbye meetings. The Canadian tech giant canceling its employees' calendars. And how an NFL player's terrifying health scare united the U.S.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. 3 years ago today, a passenger jet PS752 bound for Canada was shot down by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. For loved ones, some who lost their entire immediate family in that moment, it's felt more like a lifetime fighting for justice. Memorials took place across Canada today. There were 176 people on board, among them 55 Canadians and 30 permanent residents. In Toronto today, each of the photos of the casualties were named in a video tribute. And across the country, similar scenes played out. Global's Touria Izri spoke to some of the relatives who say they're frustrated by the inaction of the Canadian and Iranian governments and are using today's anniversary to push the government to act.
For the families of the victims, no amount of time can fill the crushing void.
Mentally, you feel emptiness.
Shaheen Moghadam has felt that emptiness for exactly 3 years. On January 8, 2020, he lost his wife Shakiba and their 9-year-old son Rostin when Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard shot down Flight PS752.
I cannot sleep. Every night, I tell you, every 20 minutes maybe, sometimes, every 1 hour, I'm waking up because I hear they calling me.
They were among the 176 people who died that day, most with ties to Canada. Across the country, people gathered on the 3rd anniversary to honor the children, wives, and husbands left behind.
The person I was, to me, it looks like a different lifetime ago. I mean, it was someone else.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau attended the largest memorial in Toronto.
We are all working together at this federal level to hold the Iranian regime accountable.
Canada formally triggered a process last month to try to hold Iran accountable through binding arbitration. If the regime refuses to take part, the case could make its way to the International Court of Justice.
It's taken so long for us to get anywhere close to justice.
Kaveh Shahruz is giving legal advice to families and believes the 2020 downing and Iran's recent deadly crackdown on anti-government protests are intertwined.
People are demanding justice for a lot of the victims of Iran's regime for the past 40 years, including those that perished on the flights.
The hope is Canada will put more pressure on Iran.
List the entirety of the nefarious Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization.
They want the RCMP to open a criminal investigation and for Ottawa to fight harder for compensation, something Moghadam doubts he'll ever see.
The problem is our government. They don't let us to go after justice.
Searching for a shred of justice after so much loss. Touria Izri, Global News, Ottawa.
Turning now to some breaking news. Almost exactly 2 years to the day of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, a similar scene is playing out in Brazil. Thousands of supporters of the country's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, broke through a barricade and stormed the Congress building in the capital. Protesters climbed on roofs and smashed windows before making their way inside. Video shows broken desks and chairs. Outside, they were met with tear gas from police. Several people were taken into custody. Many of the protesters dispute the results of the October 30th election, which saw Lula da Silva beat Bolsonaro. The former president has repeatedly questioned the credibility of the election. Da Silva was sworn in as president a week ago, and he's not currently in the capital, and says everyone involved in today's protest will be found and will be punished. To the war in Ukraine now. Russia says it struck a major blow against Ukrainian forces with missile strikes on Sunday, but the damage they claim to have dealt is being contested. Russia's defense minister claims their missiles targeted 2 bases in the eastern Donetsk region, then killed over 600 Ukrainian troops in retaliation for a Ukrainian strike last week that killed dozens of Russian soldiers. But Ukrainian officials deny Moscow's latest claims. They say despite the missiles damaging some civilian buildings, there were no signs of any casualties whatsoever. California is in the grip of a series of dangerous storms after a week of deadly weather. Some parts of the state saw heavy rain leading to widespread flooding and landslides, while others were buried in snow. Millions have been affected, and it's not over yet, with an intense atmospheric river taking aim. Jennifer Johnson has the latest.
Hundreds of roads look like rivers. High winds have torn down structures. Rivers up and down California are hitting record levels as residents are pelted with storm after storm.
I could hear the rain hitting everything, and I could hear things bouncing around my porch. One at a time, right?
First responders have had to save several people from quickly rising floodwaters, including this one in Sacramento where 2 people were rescued. The storm has caused several deaths, including a 2-year-old child killed by a falling tree.
When I first arrived on scene, a frantic father came out of the house holding the child.
Piers have been destroyed in several coastal towns. Hundreds of thousands of homes have been flooded or are without power, forcing many to live in area shelters.
Folks come to us on sometimes the worst days of their lives. Even if you don't choose to stay the night, if you've got a friend or a family that you're staying with, you can still come to the shelter, grab a hot meal.
The so-called atmospheric river coming from the Pacific Ocean has caused the torrential rains and high winds. Some Northern California ski slopes have had to shut down as chairlifts are tossed around. Many neighborhoods are shut off by fallen trees blocking roads.
This is way off the charts. Cumulatively, what we experienced in the last week is cumulatively more than I can say we've experienced in 15 years.
Crews are also working around the clock to cover breaks and hillsides with tarps to stop more landslides on terrain already weakened by drought and wildfires. Another worry for homeowners who fear they'll soon have to evacuate.
I've been working on it for quite a few days because in 20-mile-an-hour winds, it's hard to get it down.
Oh God, everything's destroyed.
And now forecasters are warning another atmospheric river of moisture will hit California Monday, bringing what they call a relentless parade of cyclones over the next few days. More dangerous weather for a state that has already had enough. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Meanwhile, Australia is experiencing what's being called a 1-in-a-100-year flood event. Large swaths of the region, the size of California, in fact, are in the northwest part of the country, and they're underwater. Many roads are impassable, and several communities are now completely isolated. Supplies have had to be flown in. Hundreds of people have been forced from their homes, and there are concerns about the number of livestock lost and the impact that's going to have on the area. The flooding was sparked last week by severe weather, a system called Ellie, a former tropical cyclone that brought with it heavy rain. There is shock and outrage in Virginia, where a grade 1 teacher was shot by a 6-year-old student. It happened in a classroom on Friday after what officials are calling an altercation, and police do not believe the shooting was accidental. The teacher was critically injured but has since improved and is currently listed as being in stable condition. No other students were hurt. It's still unclear how the child got access to the gun. The mayor of the city where this happened is now calling the shooting a red flag for the entire country. Pressure is growing on the Quebec government to hold a public inquiry into the death of an illegally detained inmate. 21-year-old Nicous D'Andre Spring died inside a Montreal prison during an altercation with guards on December 24th, a day after he was supposed to be released. Now advocates are demanding the province take a hard look at systemic racism and the role it could have played. Dan Spector has more.
A young black man lost his life because of clerical flaws and poor judgment.
2 weeks after the death of Nicous D'Andre Spring, lobby group The Red Coalition holds a press conference demanding the government do more to shine light on what happened. The group's director claiming the prison guards the young aspiring artist clashed with were rookies on the job.
The use of the pepper spray, spit guard, and then the water, it acted like a waterboard. so he was suffocating.
Spring was being detained at Bordeaux prison in Montreal as he faced multiple charges, including assaulting a peace officer, criminal harassment, and possessing a weapon for a dangerous purpose. He pleaded not guilty and was ordered released on December 23rd. But for some reason, he was still behind bars the next day. That's when an altercation with guards took place, leading to Spring's death.
We will be filing a systemic discrimination complaint with the Quebec Ombudsman.
A manager and a prison guard have been suspended, and multiple investigations are already underway, including a provincial police criminal investigation that could lead to charges against prison staff and a coroner's inquest. The Red Coalition wants the coroner's inquiry to be made public.
Any public inquiry should not just be looking at the individual case, although that's the point of departure, but looking at the structural, systemic problems that facilitated this.
The Legault government has repeatedly denied the existence of systemic racism in the province, and advocates want structural issues scrutinized.
We can't have that conversation when there's actually a blanket denial that systemic racism actually exists.
The coalition is also demanding video footage of the incident be released immediately and that an independent autopsy is completed, saying the Black community has no faith in government institutions.
It's a question of trust, really.
The Public Security Ministry said in a statement it wants to shine a light on the events surrounding Spring's death, including the illegal detention. A public inquiry has not been excluded, but the criminal investigation needs to be completed first. The mistakes made will need to be answered for. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
Still ahead, a look at Pope Benedict XVI's final resting place as it opens to the public. And what could lead to increased political instability in this country. The warning from an American-based research group. That's next. An influential U.S.-based research group is warning that Canada is at heightened risk of polarization and political dysfunction. And the group indicates several factors, including challenging economic conditions and a declining trust in traditional media, could contribute. David Aiken explains.
Last year's trucker convoy was only the most visible symptom of a Canadian society becoming increasingly polarized. Now, Eurasia Group, a New York-based consultancy, is warning its clients that the forces that spawned the protests are likely to continue and intensify in Canada in 2023. And who are Eurasia's clients? Well, some of the world's biggest pension funds and other institutional investors who need to manage risk.
It is worth watching because from an investor's perspective, if it's very difficult to tackle big issues like climate change because of a deepening and widening moat between, roughly speaking, progressives and conservatives in the country, then it's a dicier prospect for investment.
The risks to global peace and security are almost self-evident. Russia's war in Ukraine, an aggressive China, and a defensive Iran that may feel backed into a corner. Meanwhile, the world's citizens are also grappling with inflation and could be dealing with a possible energy crunch and what Eurasia Group calls global water stress. Eurasia Group's Gerald Butts, the former principal secretary to Prime Minister Trudeau, explains.
We see heavily densely populated areas, not just in the places where we Westerners would normally consign those problems to, in coastal East Africa, for instance, equatorial Asia. But you look at what's happening in the Western United States and indeed in Western Canada, we've had a mega drought of historically unprecedented proportions.
Canada is vulnerable to all of those risks, but Eurasia Group is also sounding the alarm about declining trust in traditional media combined with the country's exposure to a hyper-partisan U.S. media environment.
I think the biggest problem that it generates, though, is that there's no agreed-upon set of facts.
Now, all of these factors underline the importance and value of the country's political leaders, federal and provincial, right or left, to reach cross-partisan solutions to manage the risks in what is likely to be a turbulent 2023. Farah.
David Aiken in Ottawa. Thank you, David. The tomb of Pope Benedict XVI has opened to the public in Vatican City. His final resting place is the crypt under St. Peter's Basilica. He was buried there on Thursday after his funeral. Pope Benedict died on December 31st, ending a decade of the former and current pope living side by side in the Vatican. He was the first pope in 600 years to resign. Ahead, clearing out corporate calendars, a bold experiment by a Canadian company. Why Shopify is saying no to meetings. We discuss the pros and any potential cons next. The holidays are coming to a close and many Canadians are heading back to work. And if you work in corporate Canada, chances are lots of meetings will fill up your schedule once again. But last week, employees of e-commerce giant Shopify went into their calendars to find any long-standing or large meeting was canceled. In one swoop, Shopify estimates it scrapped 10,000 events from corporate calendars. It's part of a bold experiment from the Ottawa-based company to increase productivity. Joining us now from Toronto is Farhan Thawer. He is the Vice President of Engineering at Shopify and part of the team running this move. Farhan, thanks for joining us. First of all, how exactly does this work? Are you talking about all meetings?
Yeah, so basically what we did was we removed all recurring meetings with more than 2 people. And then we also implemented this, reaffirmed our strategy around no meeting Wednesday. So we just deleted everything from the calendar for folks.
And what was the reaction to that?
Well, it's not the first time we've done experiments like this, but the idea is kind of new year, new resolutions to, leave Slack groups that you're no longer participating in and clean the calendars. I think that at the beginning, folks are surprised, right, to see an empty calendar coming into the new year. But again, subtraction is harder than addition, right? It's easy to add things. And so we wanted to have a 2-week moratorium as well to not re-add those meetings so you can really figure out what's important.
I think a lot of people watching think that, oh, this is a great idea. I wish my company would do this. But there are a lot of questions. I mean, how does it measure productivity? How does brainstorming work? How do you convey a complex problem to a larger group of people? What is the nitty-gritty here? How does it work?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is really just give some parameters and frameworks for folks. So for example, you can have large meetings, they just have to happen on Thursday between 11 and 5 p.m. So it's really this idea that you can't overwhelm folks with meetings after meetings and then they have to do their individual contributor time at night. Instead, we want to focus on the makers, the builders, and allow them to actually do their work and have meetings be the sparingly thing that happens only once in a while.
So is it a move to get people to just call each other on the phone and if they need something instead of scheduling a whole meeting? Is that the point?
So you can still do like one-to-one meetings. The idea was just that meetings are this thing that are easy to, again, add or easy to do and hard to say no to, hard to decline. And so we wanted to make it easier for folks to actually just get all this crud off their calendar. And so we just did it for them. And now folks can, over the next 2 weeks, really figure out what's important and add those things back in if they provide value.
Are you concerned about isolation? I mean, there's those few minutes at the beginning of a meeting where people chit-chat. Are you worried about that?
Well, so we still have lots of things that we do to make sure folks are connected to the company, right? We have asynchronous and synchronous tools for folks to communicate. We're still going to have meetings. We're still probably going to have reoccurring meetings. We just wanted to start the new year with a way for folks to kind of reset and figure out what's really going to help them build things for our merchants.
Do you think this could work in other sectors as well?
Oh, 100%. I think, the outreach I've gotten from folks who said, how did you do this? Are you going to open source the tools? They're very excited about actually helping employees focus on what matters.
Okay. Farhan Thawer, Vice President of Engineering at Shopify. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
United for Damar Hamlin. Next, the heartwarming tributes to an NFL player on the mend. And it has been a dramatic week for the National Football League. Last Monday, Buffalo Bills player Damar Hamlin collapsed on the field and nearly died from a cardiac arrest. But now he's recovering in hospital and is in especially high spirits as players, coaches, and fans continue to pay tribute to him. And as Ross Lord reports, the heartwarming support from his team remains strong as they kicked off today's game.
As they took the field for the first time since a near tragedy, the Buffalo Bills wore the number 3 on their uniforms, a tribute to Damar Hamlin, whose terrifying cardiac arrest last Monday put a stop to a game and had his teammates fearing the worst.
Please rise and show your support as only Bills Mafia can.
Before the game, Hamlin posted online, "Nothing I want more than to be running out that tunnel with my brothers. God using me in a different way today." He added a picture of himself in his hospital bed. Another positive development for a 24-year-old known for expressing love and support to others.
We can't wait to see you get better, and when you're back, it's going to be a huge celebration. We love you, and this one's for you today, baby. Let's go, Buffalo!
On the opening kickoff came a stunning development. The result, an absolute contrast to the last time they were on the field. Hamlin's doctors say he'd likely have died, if not for immediate CPR and the use of a defibrillator on him while on the field. In hospital, Hamlin communicated at first in writing, asking doctors a question.
When he asked, did we win? The answer is, yes, Damar, you won. You've won the game of life.
Hamlin's breathing tube has since been removed. Doctors say he's recovering remarkably well and is able to speak to his family and his care team. In another online post, Hamlin said he's thankful to everyone who's reached out and prayed. This will make me stronger on the road to recovery. Hamlin's brush with death has some football analysts suggesting fans should rethink their obsession with a dangerous game. But in a country where political partisanship has created deep divisions, Hamlin's ordeal has also brought people together for a common cause. Ross Lord, Global News.
And that's Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Farah Nasser. On behalf of our whole crew, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is the rainy streets of downtown Vancouver. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep emailing us those photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Donna will be back with you tomorrow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.